Chapter 1. Exile in the Borderlands. The wind came howling down from the Wormtooth Mountains, dragging mist like funeral veils across the broken landscape. Shan Yuè trudged through it in silence, her boots squelching in the blackened mud, her breath visible in ragged puffs. The ruined pagoda in the distance loomed like a jagged tooth, its lacquered wood long since rotted, roof tiles scattered like dragon scales. Each step echoed with the ghost of memory. Once she had walked silk-lined halls, encanted before emperors. Now she scavenged in the corpse ribs of a forgotten empire. Her robes, once crimson and gold, were faded and torn, mud-stained and scorched from months of flight. The lacquered charm bangles clinking on her wrists had dulled, their protective sigils eaten away by time and neglect. A jade talisman around her neck, shaped like an eye, with 7 lashes, glowed faintly beneath her collar, the last gift of a dying mentor before the purge. She hadn't heard her own name spoken with respect in over a year. In the imperial court, she had been Lady Yuè of the Sapphire Scroll, mistress of fire and dream smoke, a sorceress so precise her spells whispered instead of thundered. But ambition had curdled into defiance. She had questioned the celestial hierarchs, dared to interpret ancient omens without permission. Her apprentices were silenced, her scrolls were burned. She fled beneath the blood moon, the head of her familiar impaled on a spike behind her. Since then, she had crossed blistered deserts, plague-swollen villages, and mountain passes infested with ape demons. She had killed more than she remembered, and bled more than she should have. Her hands bore the tremor of spellburn, her eyes the sheen of sleeplessness. She lived now by bargains struck in shadows, trading curses for food, exorcisms for shelter. The land whispered of her in taverns and temples, the Witch of Ashes, the red-handed exile. Tonight, she was heading north, drawn by something older than desperation, curiosity. In the cracked border town of Gongwei, she'd heard a half-drunk monk mumble of a tomb unearthed by an earthquake near the Wormtooth's roots, a palace of sleeping jade and silence, he'd said, before choking on his wine. Shan had pried more from his mouth, with coin and a threat of nightmares, learning that the tomb bore markings older than the dragon thrones hidden deep in the earth's ribs. He'd warned her not to go, which meant it was exactly where she needed to be. Lightning flared above the mountains, casting their serpent shapes into stark relief. Thunder rolled in like a wave, and rain began to fall cold, relentless, scarring the exposed slopes. Shan squinted through the downpour, shielding her eyes as she climbed a shattered ridge lined with toppled statues, their faces eroded beyond recognition. Then she saw it half buried under moss and scree, wedged into the mountain's flank like a splinter, a seal. She slipped down the slick incline, boots sliding on wet stone until she reached it. Kneeling, she ran her hands across the cold surface, smooth obsidian, rimmed with veins of sickly green jade. The symbol etched into it made her flinch. It was no ordinary glyph, not one of the 9 celestial scripts, nor the death words of the court astrologers. It was older, fractured along a hairline crack that pulsed faintly with green light, as though something beneath it still breathed. The glyph was a stylized eye, slit-pupilled and circled by coiling dragons. But where one dragon was usually carved to face another balance, this design was asymmetrical. The larger dragon devoured the smaller. The seal was cracked through the devoured one's throat. A warning? Or a promise? Shan Yuè drew back her hood and placed both hands on the seal. Power hummed beneath her palms, tainted, unclean, but hungry. Her mouth tasted of copper, The jade pulsed faster, as if recognizing her touch. She should have walked away. Instead, she whispered, a single syllable in the tongue of the forgotten. Zhao Yao. Light burst from the crack like a wound splitting open. The air rippled. The stone groaned. Shan staggered back as the seal moved, rotating a fraction, grinding against ancient stone, releasing a gust of air that hadn't been breathed in over 1,000 years. It smelled of incense and rot, perfume and charnel smoke. The mist around her seemed to recoil. The mountain rumbled, and a circular door beneath the seal slid open, revealing darkness within. No stairs, no descent, just void lined with symbols that shifted when she blinked. Something laughed, faintly, or maybe wept. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. She hesitated. Her hands shook, not from fear, but recognition. This was no ordinary tomb. This was a shrine, a prison carved in reverence and dread. She could feel the arcane architecture etched into the walls, the way the jade lines repelled demons and devoured memory. It wasn't built to protect the dead. It was built to keep something in. She stepped back from the entrance, her heart beat loud in her ears. Rain hissed on stone around her. She pulled her coat tighter, muttered a protective hex, and turned to leave. But then she saw the figure at the top of the ridge. It wasn't human, tall and thin, swathed in rags that fluttered in the storm. It bore the elongated mask of an imperial mourner painted jade, with no eye holes. The mask was cracked down the middle, just like the seal, its head cocked to one side, like a bird studying prey. Shan froze. Another figure appeared beside it. Then another, 6 of them, all silent, all masked, all watching her from the ridge. Their robes were stitched with faded gold, patterned with symbols she had only ever seen in forbidden scrolls, the sigils of the eclipsed court, the ruling dynasty that predated even the dragon emperor's birth. They had been erased from history, their records purged, their shrines toppled, the legends whispered of betrayal, black rites, and an empress who burned her own capital in a final act of defiance. The Jade Empress. Shan Yuè didn't know if these figures were spirits, illusions, or cultists, but she knew one thing for certain. They weren't alive in any traditional sense. Her hand drifted toward her satchel, fingers brushing over a spell scroll bound in eel skin. Then the seal behind her slammed shut, throwing up a gust of jade dust. The figures turned in unison, without a word, and vanished into the mist, leaving only footprints in the wet stone burned black as pitch. Shan stood alone again. The tomb was sealed, but not like before. Something had changed. Something had shifted, and in her bones she felt the weight of eyes now watching her, not from the ridge, but from below. She turned and walked away, her steps faster now, her breath fogging in the cold. The storm raged harder. Lightning splintered the sky, but deep in the earth, beneath jade and stone, something ancient stirred from its slumber, its hunger blooming like rot in a wound. And far above, in the imperial city she once called home, a monk convulsed during prayer, coughing up blood and black petals. The exile had broken the first seal, and the ashes of the Jade Empress had begun to smolder. Chapter 2. The Tomb Beneath Jade. The seal should not have opened again. Shan Yuè knew that with the cold certainty of long study and bitter experience, wards of that age did not simply yield, they demanded sacrifice, blood, memory, or madness. Yet as she returned beneath the Wormtooth Mountains at dawn, the storm spent and the land slick with rain and ash, The circular slab of obsidian had shifted once more. The crack of jade light now yawned wide enough to swallow a cart, breathing out air that prickled her skin and set her teeth on edge. She stood before it for a long while, staff planted in the mud, listening. No bird sang. The wind did not cross the threshold. Even the mountain seemed to hold its breath. Shan tightened the wrappings around her hands, tracing protective sigils in ash and salt along her forearms. She whispered counter-invocations under her breath. Old ones, crude ones, the kind that offended court scholars but kept you alive. The jade talisman at her throat throbbed like a second pulse. Then she stepped into the dark. The descent was not a stair, but a slope, spiraling downward in a slow, nauseating curve. The stone beneath her boots was smooth as glass, carved with concentric rings of jade inlaid so precisely they might have grown there. Each ring bore scenes etched in shallow relief, processions of kneeling figures, burning cities, dragons devouring suns. As she passed, the carvings seemed to shift, the figures' faces turning subtly toward her, mouths open in silent screams or adoration. The air grew warmer the deeper she went, heavy with incense, and something fouler beneath old blood, embalming resins, rot trapped and recycled for centuries. Her lantern flame burned green, reacting to the saturation of sorcery soaked into the stone. With each step, Shan felt pressure behind her eyes, as though unseen fingers were probing her thoughts, testing the locks of her mind. At the bottom of the slope, the passage opened into a vast antechamber. She stopped short, breath-catching. The room was cathedral-wide, its ceiling lost in shadow, held aloft by pillars carved as coiled dragons, whose eyes were set with jade gems the size of fists. Braziers lined the walls, cold and blackened, each etched with the same asymmetrical sigil she had seen on the seal. The floor was a mosaic of jade and obsidian, fractured in places as though something beneath had once pushed upward. And everywhere relics. Weapon racks lined one wall, halberds with jade-edged blades, their hafts wrapped in silk that disintegrated at her touch. Armor stood on lacquered frames, scale and plate fused together in impossible geometries, each piece engraved with prayers not meant for mortal throats. There were thrones, too, low and wide, carved from single blocks of jade, their armrests worn smooth by centuries of kneeling hands. This was not a tomb meant for rest. It was a memorial of rule. Shan moved slowly, reverently, dread coiling in her gut. She recognized the craftsmanship. This was older than any surviving Cathayan dynasty, predating even the oldest dragon-etched records. The name whispered in her thoughts unbidden, dragged up from censored scrolls and burned libraries. Empress-goddess, the Jade Empress, the God Queen, the devourer of heaven's mandate. History claimed she never existed, that her name was a corruption, a heresy invented by border cultists. Yet here lay her legacy, untouched by time, steeped in power so dense it made Shan's vision blur. At the center of the chamber stood a dais, raised and circular, its steps cracked and scorched. Upon it rested a sarcophagus of jade veined with gold, its surface carved with scenes of conquest and immolation. Huayin stood depicted in every panel, tall, crowned, her face serene, as cities burned at her feet. Dragons knelt before her, gods recoiled. Shan swallowed. She should have turned back. She should have resealed the tomb, buried it beneath wards and prayer, and fled. But the air itself seemed to pull her forward, her boots carrying her to the base of the dais before she fully realized she had moved. The jade talisman at her neck flared hot. She gasped and tore it free, casting it aside as it cracked down the middle. The lantern flickered wildly, shadows writhing across the walls. The sarcophagus hummed, a low, resonant sound that vibrated through her bones. "Stay asleep," Shan muttered, planting her staff and drawing a containment sigil in blood on the stone. "You were buried for a reason." The sigil flared and then collapsed. A shockwave threw her backward, smashing her into a pillar. Pain exploded through her shoulder as something inside her tore a ward, a memory. She couldn't tell. She screamed, tasting blood, as jade light erupted from the sarcophagus in searing lines. The lid shifted, not opening, not breaking, breathing. Green fire leaked from the seams, coiling upward like smoke. The carvings along the sarcophagus began to move, Hua Ying's carved eyes glowing with malignant awareness. Shan staggered to her feet, vision swimming, as a voice poured into her mind, not sound, not language, but presence. "So small," it murmured, "so late." The lid slid aside with a grinding shriek. Inside was not a corpse. It was a void, a hollow filled with swirling jade flame, within which floated a shape, half-formed and fractured. A woman's silhouette, tall and crowned, her lower half dissolving into smoke and embers. Her face was beautiful and terrible, eyes like molten jade, mouth split by a smile carved from cruelty and longing. Shan fell to one knee, retching as divine pressure crushed her lungs. The spirit regarded her with hunger. "You are not priest," it said, "not daughter, not sacrifice." Its gaze sharpened. "You are a wound." The flame surged forward, lashing out. Shan screamed as it struck her chest, burning through cloth and flesh without heat, searing her soul instead. Memories burst behind her eyes, court halls, executions, her master's face as the blade fell. The spirit drank deeply, shuddering in pleasure. "Yes," it whispered, "exile, bitterness, betrayal, you taste of me." Shan dragged herself backward, carving ward after ward into the stone with shaking hands, each one shattering as the spirit pressed closer. Her staff split, runes burning out. Blood streamed from her nose and ears. "You're not whole," she rasped. "You're just a fragment, a shadow." The spirit laughed, the sound like breaking jade. "I am what remains when gods are butchered," it hissed. "I am the crown they could not destroy. I am Hua Yin." The chamber shook. Braziers toppled. The dragon pillars cracked, jade eyes shattering as green fire spilled across the floor. The spirit recoiled suddenly, snarling not at Shan, but at the broken seal above. "They still bind me," it spat. "Cowards, worms." Its gaze snapped back to Shan, burning with intent. "You will walk the world for me. You will bleed seals open. You will feed me." Shan screamed defiance and flung the last of her magic like a knife, a desperate surge that struck the spirit's core. There was no explosion, only resistance, thick and suffocating. The fragment shrieked, rearing back as if wounded, its form flickering. The sarcophagus slammed shut. The chamber went silent. Shan collapsed onto the jade floor, gasping, her body racked with pain. The green light dimmed, retreating into cracks and seams. The pressure lifted, leaving only the stench of burnt incense and fear. But as she lay there, bleeding and broken, she felt it, a presence, not looming, not crushing, nestled deep within her, like a coal pressed into flesh. The fragment of the Jade Empress had not fully awakened, but it had mocked her. Far above, the mountain groaned as ancient wards adjusted. their balance disturbed for the first time in centuries, and deep within the tomb, beneath jade and gold and lies, something divine and starving waited, no longer alone, no longer asleep. Shan Yuè dragged herself to her feet, knowing with terrible clarity that she had not entered a tomb. She had entered a throat, and the empire beyond was already beginning to feel the hunger stirring below. Chapter 3. The Hunger Stirs. The voice followed her, even after the sarcophagus sealed and the tomb dimmed once more into jade-veined shadow. Shan Yuè felt it coiled in her skull like smoke in a bottle. Empress-goddess, a sliver of divine spite clawed free from the grave. She staggered up the spiral corridor, breath ragged, the taste of blood thick in her throat. Her vision swam, her fingertips burned from the last wards she'd cast. Even now, her veins tingled with residual magic, tainted, volatile. Every step echoed like a drumbeat in a hollow chest. And still the voice whispered, "You don't have to crawl anymore, exile." The tone was coaxing, not a command yet. You were cast out for speaking truth, for defying those who only parrot the will of dead stars. I remember what that tastes like. Let me teach you how to burn them all down. No, Shan gasped, pressing her palm to the tunnel wall to steady herself. Her legs shook beneath her. You seek silence, but you opened the door. You called my name, even if you didn't know it. You fed me with your pain, and now I am awake. The corridor trembled. A soft wind, wrong in direction and colder than death, flowed up from the depths, carrying a sibilant hiss like distant chanting. She turned once, only once, and saw the green fire returning. Not like before. This was no eruption. It moved like a tide, slow and deliberate, licking the walls as if claiming them. She ran. The exit was far, her strength spent, but the fear pushing her forward was deeper than the exhaustion. Up the slope, faster now, boots slipping on slick jade. Behind her, the fire surged, illuminating the tunnel in lurid pulses. The reliefs on the wall moved in its glow, those kneeling worshippers now clawing at unseen chains, their mouths agape in silent torment. At last, the mouth of the tomb appeared. Moonlight filtered through mist beyond the threshold. Shan leapt the final steps and collapsed into the mud outside just as the entrance screamed shut, stone grinding against stone, sealing with a final pulse of blinding jade light that sent her flying back. She landed hard, rolling through wet grass and ash. The pain brought her clarity. The tomb was gone. Where the carved entrance had stood, only scorched rock remained, melted smooth by the spectral flame that had licked it shut. The mist recoiled from it, the very air repulsed by the mark left behind. She lay on her back for a long time, staring at the sky. The clouds above twisted and churned, no longer natural. Storms gathered with unnatural speed, tinged green at their edges. Lightning forked in slow, deliberate arcs. The winds shrieked with a voice too close to human, and all the while, Huayin's voice lingered in Shan's skull. This world has forgotten how to kneel, but you, my sweet apostate, you will teach them again. 2 days passed before Shan reached shelter, trudging down from the mountains into a half-abandoned monastery clinging to a cliffside. The monks were dead, long dead, by the look of it, their bodies desiccated, still seated in their prayer circles, their mouths filled with dried petals and broken jade teeth. Whatever god they had worshipped had not come to save them. She rested there, drinking rainwater, treating her wounds with old herbs and ash paste. She didn't sleep. Not really. Not with the dreams. They weren't hers. She saw cities burning beneath banners of green flame, imperial palaces cracking like eggs, priests nailed to dragon gates, their scriptures turned to serpents, and in the center of it all she saw herself cloaked in shadow and jade, her eyes aglow with stolen power, a crown she did not want resting on her brow. The Empress fed her memories like barbed candy, forbidden rituals, lost tongues, the secret names of stars that burned blue before time began, magic older than harmony, magic before order. Each vision came with a cost pain in her joints, a deepening hunger in her belly that food could not touch. Her fingertips twitched with spell signs she didn't remember learning, and worst of all, she began to understand them. The voice had nestled deep now, less a whisper, more a second breath. It didn't scream, it didn't demand, it offered. They will hunt you, but I can unmake them, every blade, every lie. Let me teach you the fire that eats fire. By the fourth day, the rumors had begun to spread. In the capital, beneath the ivory towers of the celestial bureaucracy, augurs read the storms in panic. Rain no longer followed the dragon lines. Lightning struck sacred pools. The flow of chi twisted, clogging the channels like rotting blood. One seer, ancient and blind, flung herself from the balcony of the astrological chamber, screaming of a sleeper cracked open. The imperial court stirred. Scrolls long sealed were opened. Tomes of black jade were carried from beneath the hall of silent wind. Within their pages, archivists found the glyph, the devouring dragon, the slit-pupiled eye. They called it the Mark of Huayin. 12 agents were summoned by midnight. The Jade Inquisitors, silent-cloaked and silver-masked, each sworn to the preservation of mandate. They were told of the disturbance in the Wormtooth Range, of a tomb whispered only in heresy, now sealed again but breathing. Their orders were clear. Find the exile, recover what she woke, and if she could not be recovered, burn her. Far from the capital, in gutters and shrines and brothels where candles burned for forgotten gods, another kind of whisper spread. They said a woman had walked out of the mountains speaking in tongues not heard since before the Celestial War, that her eyes wept jade, that wolves fled from her, that she bled ink and prophecy. Cultists stirred. In the sewers of Zhangkai, a priestess with inked teeth slit a pig's throat and read its intestines like scripture. She smiled with all her gums. The Empress rises, she rasped. In the desert city of Nianwu, a butcher wrapped a severed head in silk and carried it to a hidden altar of bone, muttering, "She calls, we answer." By week's end, 10 shrines bore fresh offerings. 20 bore corpses. The cult of the burning veil, once scattered, now thrummed with sudden unity. They moved in silence, painting the sigil on walls, coins, eyes. Not all believed, not yet, but something had awakened, and it hungered. Shan Yuè knew they were coming, not because of scouts or spies, but because the voice told her. In her dreams, in the bones she cracked for warmth, in the patterns of flies that gathered on her reflection. She'd left the monastery behind, wandering south into swampy lowlands, where mist clung low and the sun had not been seen in days. The world felt thinner here. Trees bent away from her, animals wouldn't meet her eyes, and all the while, the storm followed her, a slow-moving wound across the sky, emerald veins streaking the clouds, thunder that sometimes whispered her name. She stood now by a ruined watchtower, watching the road. Her staff was whole again, not physically, but remade from memory and spite, its wood dark and veined with jade that hadn't been there before. Spells she couldn't have written a week ago now sat coiled on her tongue. She was changing. She felt it in her blood, her bones, her breath, but worse still, she wasn't sure she hated it. The world had turned its back on her. The celestial throne had branded her heretic, traitor, exile. They thought her alone. They didn't know what she had brought back with her. They didn't know what followed her now. Lightning cracked overhead, and far in the distance, beneath the bruised sky, the first of the agents appeared, robed figures on horseback, masks of silver glinting in the stormlight. Shan Yuè watched them come, and somewhere deep inside her, the Empress laughed, not loud, not triumphant, but with expectation. The hunger had stirred, and it would not sleep again. Chapter 4. Bounty of the Damned. They found the corpse 2 days north of Zhenlu, charred black, limbs twisted at impossible angles, its face a melted rictus of terror and supplication. It was lashed to a tree with crimson wire, eyes burned to cinders, no wounds, no blood, just ash where the heart should have been. Iron Fang Liu crouched beside the body, knuckles dusted in snow mud, his breath calm. He stared for a long while, reading the scene with the cool detachment of a man for whom death was currency. "She's getting bolder," he said at last, rising to his feet with a grunt. Behind him, his crew shifted uneasily. 5 killers, each one damned by law or spirit. There was Bone Dog, tall and skeletal, face tattooed with a laughing skull. Nian the Quiet, whose chain sickle whispered like reeds in wind. Yutu, the girl with a porcelain doll's face and a bandolier of poisoned bells. Then the twins, Huo and Huan, firecasters bound by a curse that would kill them if ever separated. They didn't speak, not to each other, not to Liu. Their loyalty was bound by coin and spell ink, not kinship, and the bounty was good. 1,000 silver eyes for Shan Yuè, alive, if possible, soul intact, body unspoiled. If dead, the price dropped by half, but only if the corpse could still be burned clean. Liu read between the lines. It wasn't just heresy they were hunting. It was infestation. Zhenlu was a trading town, more rot than stone, wedged between rice mires and forest like a half-sunk coin. It stank of fermented fish, mule dung, and desperate deals. The walls were patched with scavenged tiles, the gate barely manned. Inside, a market stretched like a tumor along the main road, stalls cluttered with incense, spices, and charms that hadn't worked in generations. Shan Yuè entered under a veil of grey cloth, hood low, staff wrapped in oilskin. Her eyes scanned the crowd with predator caution. The Empress's voice hummed in her skull. Quieter now, a lull between storms. "This place knows me," it said. "I once cut 1,000 throats beneath this sky. They buried the bones beneath the fish ponds." Shan said nothing. She gripped her satchel tighter. Inside were the tools of barter, 2 cursed coins that whispered in dreams, a bone ring that turned snakes to stone, and a shriveled, mummified tongue sealed in lacquer, a relic that once belonged to a screaming oracle. She hated every piece, but she needed the silver. She needed passage east past the flooded lowlands and the forests where spirits had begun to howl again. The map inside her head, gifted and burned by the Empress, marked a ruin far beyond the reach of the celestial bureaucracy. The second seal. She could feel it, like a tooth under the skin of the world, itching. She traded the ring for a ferry token, the coins for rations and a sleeping roll, and the tongue for a promise, a riverboat to leave at dusk, under no name, headed into waters haunted by bandits and worse. The merchant didn't ask questions. Not aloud. His eyes bled the next morning. Liu arrived by noon. He paid a girl for a whisper, a beggar for a direction, and a tavern for silence. His boots tracked fresh prints into the mud of Zhenlu. Behind him, the crew followed like shadows, visible only if you knew what to look for. "She's here," he said. "Find the boat." They didn't question how he knew. Liu had a nose for prey, especially the kind already touched by gods. Shan felt the pull of danger before the bells rang. Yutu's traps were delicate glass beads laced with blood, disguised as charms. One cracked beneath a cart near the river pier. The sound, to trained ears, was unmistakable. Shan froze, heart hammering. She ducked behind a stack of fish crates, muttered a ward under her breath, and drew the staff free from its wrappings. The air around her trembled. A man across the square began screaming as his eyes boiled, caught in the backwash of her rising aura. "Run," the Empress whispered. "No spells yet. You are not ready." Shan ignored her and cast shatter root. The dock erupted in splinters. Crates flew. A figure in black robes was launched into the water, hissing, one of the twins. She turned and ran, through alleys that stank of mold and piss, past hawkers shouting curses and guards too afraid to interfere. She vaulted a fence, rolled through a pigsty, and kept running. Behind her, the town erupted into chaos. The bounty hunters pursued like wolves. Liu cornered her near the west wall, sword drawn. He wasn't Jade, just steel honest and bloodied. Shan raised her staff. He smiled. "Don't bother," he said. "The next spell you cast will crack your skull. I've seen it happen. Your aura's overloaded. The thing in you is eating too fast." She said nothing. He circled, boots squelching in the wet earth. "You're not her yet," he said. "Not fully, but it's coming, isn't it? The dreams, the hunger, the fire behind your teeth?" Still silence. He stopped. "Let me help you, witch." She lunged. Steel met staff. Sparks flew. Her strike was faster than he expected, desperate, savage. Liu grunted as the second blow cracked his shoulder, but he spun and drove his knee into her gut, knocking the wind out of her. She fell hard, blood in her mouth, pain like lightning down her spine. Liu raised his sword. Then the bells rang again. Yutus, dozens of them. The air sang with their chime thin, poisonous, unnatural. The pigs in the sty 100 yards away began shrieking. Somewhere a dog exploded. Shan rolled, screaming words she barely understood. A wave of jade flame burst from her body, not as a spell but a convulsion. Liu was thrown back, his coat on fire. 3 buildings collapsed. The sky cracked open, and the Empress laughed. She didn't remember fleeing, only the river, dark and wide, swallowing her like a wound. Cold water, a stolen boat, a merchant screaming, her own heartbeat, a war drum in her ears. She didn't stop until the fires of Zhenlu were distant, a flicker behind rain and smoke. She collapsed in the boat's hull, soaked and shaking. The Empress spoke again. "Now they know your name, little spark. Let them come. Let them try." Shan wept, not for them, for herself, because part of her wanted to let it happen. Chapter 5. Scrolls of the Forbidden Path. The boat drifted for days. Shan Yuè lay curled in the shadowed hull, cloaked in soaked rags, too weak to cast, to curse, to pray. The oarsman, an old mute who reeked of tallow and wormroot, hadn't asked her name. He didn't need to. Every few hours, He glanced at her out of the corner of his eye, the way men watch fire on dry grass. He dropped her at the foot of the shrouded hills without a word. The hills rose like the vertebrae of some dead god, thick with black pine and mist that clung like smoke. A single trail carved its way into their depths, thin, overgrown, winding. At its end, beyond stone lanterns defaced by centuries of rain, stood the hermitage. It wasn't much to look at. A squat temple, half swallowed by vines in disrepair, tiles fallen, doors swollen with rot, statues of forgotten spirits decapitated and buried beneath moss. But there was power here, ancient, brittle, and utterly still. She limped through the gates and collapsed before the shrine, her hands bloody and her breath wheezing. "I need to speak with Master Ku," she rasped. "Tell him the exile of the Jade Court comes bearing a fire she cannot quench." There was silence. Then, from within the darkened temple, a soft voice replied, "Then come and burn, girl. Let us see what ash remains." Master Ku had once been the chief historian of the celestial bureaucracy. Back when emperors still sought truth and not just loyalty, he'd spoken too freely, too often. They hadn't killed him. They'd struck his name from the record, unmade him with ink and decree. In Cathay, that was worse than death. He looked like a man half turned to wood, his skin bark-like, his nails long, hair like withered vines. He walked barefoot and leaned on a staff carved from a single length of dragon bone. His blind eyes glowed faintly with amber fire, though Shan could feel him watching her through her skin. He brewed tea that tasted like mud and grave dust. "You are fouled," he said after her third sip. "I am haunted. Worse, you are inhabited." She flinched, sweat prickling her neck. "She is in my blood," Shan said. "I need her out." Master Ku chuckled, dry as shed skin. "No, girl. You want her bound, not removed. There's a difference. You came here for chains, not exorcism. Otherwise, you'd already be dead." She swallowed hard. "Then you know how to forge them." "I know how they were broken." He rose, slow and crackling, and led her into the back of the hermitage. Through curtains of dust and cracked tablets, they descended into a chamber lit by blue fireflies, shrine worms, bred in darkness to illuminate forgotten scripture. On the walls were scrolls, hundreds of them, skins of dragon, snake, and ghost, inked with languages that predated the current cycle of the moon. Many were sealed behind jade panes, others covered in rusting chains. Shan's breath caught. These were forbidden. "Some of these will burn you just by reading them," Ku said. "Others will take your tongue. Choose carefully." She stepped closer. The Empress stirred within her, growling like a chained beast. "These words bound me once," Huayin whispered. "Cowards and worms, chaining the sun with thread and prayer." Shan ignored her. She reached for a scroll bound in eelhide, etched with symbols that shimmered when her fingers neared. Ku did not stop her. When she unrolled it, she saw the 9 seals of Jade. Not just images. Instructions, rites, warnings. Each seal was a prison, metaphysical, arcane, spiritual. Bound not to stone or blood, but acts, betrayals, sacrifices, silences. The first had already broken, the seal of forgetting, shattered when Shan entered the tomb and remembered Huayin's name. The second deafness was weakening. It protected the world from the Empress's voice. Already, she was whispering across dreams, slipping through cracks in weaker minds. The rest were worse. The seal of innocence, the seal of repetition, the seal of flesh. She would need to reenact the rites that first sealed Huayin, and in doing so, Walk the same path the Empress once burned through the world. Shan's hands shook. Each seal, Ku said softly, requires part of your soul, your mind, yourself, piece by piece, until what remains is no longer you. Then I die? She asked. No, Ku said. You become her. That silenced them both. The fireflies pulsed. Somewhere deep in the temple, something howled a long, mournful sound, like a prayer lost to wind. Shan looked down at the scroll again. I have to try. Then begin, Ku said. While you still can tell the difference between your voice and hers. She stayed 3 days, studying. Ku fed her silence and riddles, breaking his words with coughing fits that stained cloth with green. The temple seemed to sense her growing burden. The air thickened. Shadows clung to her skin longer than they should. The fireflies began to die. At night, the Empress screamed, not in pain, in joy. Each scroll opened was another thread unraveled, another chain tasted. Shan dreamt of Jade cities sunken in blood, of her own body walking without her will, of mirrors that showed her smiling in robes of emerald flame. She awoke to find the first of the ritual brands etched into her skin, glowing faintly, spelling out the word vessel. Ku didn't ask. He only wept. On the 4th morning, she prepared to leave. Rain fell in sheets, and the hills roared with wind. Shan stood beneath the arch of the temple gate, her staff now laced with sigil wire, her scroll satchel heavier than before. Ku handed her a final relic, a shard of cracked jade, black at the edges. What is it? She asked. The last piece of the 9th seal, he said. The seal of regret. It can only be restored when you renounce everything, power, memory, vengeance, all of it. Shan closed her fingers around it. And if I can't, then she becomes you, or you become her. Either way, the world ends in fire. She nodded. As she stepped into the storm, the Empress stirred again. You think you carry the chain, Huayin purred, but I am the weight around your neck, and when you fall, I will rise. Shan did not answer. There was no need. The path ahead was long, and the seals were breaking. Chapter 6. The Cult of the Burning Veil. The cult wore veils soaked in blood and ash, and they lit their fires with the bones of poets. Shan Yuè entered their sanctum beneath the cracked ruins of Juteng Monastery, dressed in rags stolen from a dead acolyte, her face hidden behind a stained veil stitched with symbols that writhed when touched by candlelight. The tunnels beneath the ruins stank of rot and incense, of ancient oils and offerings left too long in the dark. Somewhere deep in the caverns, a gong made of stretched skin tolled once every hour. It never rang the same note twice. The cult of the Burning Veil had taken root here, like a fungal bloom in the ribs of the world. They had a name for what stirred beyond the jade seals. She who was fire, the crown of regret, Huayin resplendent. They dared speak it aloud. Shan walked among them in silence, hands clasped, hood low, absorbing what she could. The cult was not large, perhaps 40 men and women, each marked by fever and ritual scarring. Their eyes were clouded with devotion, their spines bent in reverence. They read from scrolls inked in ichor. They wept before statues of faceless women wreathed in fire, and in the deepest chamber they gathered to feed the flames. Sacrifice, some alive, some broken, all screaming. She watched one, an old farmer, dragged by chain, offered to a pyre that burned cold, green, unnatural, flickering, in a rhythm that pulsed with something aware. The fire licked his skin, not charring it, but draining it, pulling not just the flesh but the essence. His soul writhed like smoke, drawn upward into a carved jade urn that hovered, suspended by chains of whispering spirits. When the ritual ended, the fire was brighter, and Shan felt her spine chill. The Empress stirred within her. "They remember," Yuè whispered. "They honor me, even in madness. But it's not you they feed." Shan murmured back, unseen in the shadows. "Not entirely. No. The truth was worse. The fire wasn't her, not yet. It was a conduit. The cult, knowingly or not, had pierced the veil between Cathay and the realm of chaos. Every soul they offered didn't simply empower the fragment of Hui Yin buried in Shan's soul. It also bled into the warp, drawing attention. Daemon-flies buzzed near the flames. Shadows moved where light should fall. The ritual chants sometimes bent in unnatural harmonies, syllables pulled from dead languages. If the cult continued, if the Empress rose fully, there would be no throne, no ruler, only consumption. She had to end it, but first she had to escape. She was discovered by a zealot named Yuè, a high-ranking member with a tattooed tongue and a third eye stitched into his forehead. He saw her during the third offering, saw the hesitation in her hands, the disgust in her still sane eyes. He followed her through the tunnels, cornered her by the fire pit, where the cult branded its initiates. "You don't belong," Yuè hissed, fingers twitching with a sigil of binding. "The fire does not speak your name. I know it better than you ever will," Shan growled. The Empress surged inside her, eager, hungry, but Shan resisted. Too early, too exposed. Yuè smiled, sensing the tension. He raised a hand. "Then prove it. By flame and blade." The ritual duel was held in the crucible, a chamber carved into the shape of an inverted lotus, petals lined with obsidian shards and blood glyphs. Dozens of cultists crowded the ledges above, chanting, swaying, eyes wide with fanatic joy. In the center, two combatants. No armor, no wards, only spell and will. Yuè stood shirtless, his skin a tapestry of scars and burning ink. His weapon was a glaive made of bone and rusted iron, etched with daemon script. Shan entered barefoot, robes torn, her staff newly bound with silk soaked in river water. She felt brittle, tired, wrong, but the Empress whispered, "Let me show you what they buried." The duel began with a scream. Yuè struck first arcs of red fire slashing through the air, glyphs burning the very air around her. Shan parried with a windshield, barely holding. Her counterstrike was a weave of chains and ice, but he shattered it with a bellow, blood spilling from his mouth in ritual ecstasy. "You are weak," he roared. "You are not her." Shan staggered back. Her staff cracked. The cult howled above, scenting death. She was losing. The Empress surged again. "Say the name. Speak the word. Take the gift." Shan clenched her jaw. She whispered a forgotten syllable, a fragment buried deep within her memories, not taught, but inherited. Not of Cathay, not of gods, but of Empress. The crucible shuddered. Her eyes burned green. The wound on her shoulder glowed. Her skin split open along her arms as lines of jade light etched themselves into her flesh, marks of power, old and hungry. Yuè hesitated. Too late. Shan raised her broken staff and unleashed the spell. It had no name. It did not require one. It bent the crucible into a mouth. The stone screamed. The petals curled inward. Yue's body was seized by tendrils of jade fire, dragged toward the pit's center. He screamed until his voice tore apart. The cult tried to flee, but the fire was spreading. It wanted more. Shan turned, limping, bleeding, eyes wild. She spat on the burning floor. "Feed on that," she growled. The Empress purred in approval. "We will burn them all, little flame." She fled through the tunnels, ducking collapsing stone, dodging the dying howls of cultists, consumed by the very power they worshipped. Behind her, the crucible folded into itself. The fire went dark, but the hunger did not. Chapter 7. Blades in the Mist. The sacred gardens of Mount Xing were silent. Once, they had been a place of pilgrimage, terraced paths winding through ancient cherrywood, koi ponds that reflected stars, prayer wheels spun by wind, and lotus blossoms that bloomed only by moonlight. Now, the trees wept black sap, and the ponds were thick with algae the color of spoiled jade. The petals had withered. The wind whispered omens. The gods no longer walked here. Shan Yuè knelt by the third pond, fingers dripping with blood and ink, bent over the remains of a half-broken seal recovered from the ruins beneath the burning veil's crucible. The jade was cracked, the glyphs smudged, its power flickering like a guttering flame. Even holding it burned her skin. The Empress laughed within her skull. "You seek to restore what was meant to be shattered. You cling to order like a child to a dying lantern." Shan ignored her. She smeared ash over the seal, reciting the stabilizing chant she'd found in Master Ku's scrolls. Her voice trembled, her breath fogged in the cold. The mountain mist thickened around her like a burial shroud. And then she wasn't alone. Footsteps, careful, measured, still chasing ghosts, a voice said behind her. "You never learned when to let go." She froze. The voice came from memory, a blade she thought buried. Shan turned slowly. He stood beneath a shattered prayer arch, draped in black and crimson, his face half hidden by a porcelain mask shaped like a fox. The robes marked him an imperial astromancer. The voice marked him as Yan Zhen. Once her lover, now her judge. "I dreamed of this place," he said softly, "of your death in the mist. The stars showed me your blood on stone. You always did mistake dreams for prophecy," Shan said. Yan stepped forward, unhurried. Behind him, more figures emerged, 12, clad in silk-draped armor, weapons drawn. The celestial bureaucracy's executioners, agents of mandate and silence. Each bore a different weapon. Each had already killed for less than Shan's crimes. "You opened the first seal," Yan said. "You let her speak again. I tried to bind her. You failed. I'm still trying." Yan's gaze flicked to the broken seal in her hands. "Too late." She stirs. Her name has passed from lips to flame. The world begins to burn again. Shan stood slowly, staff in hand. "I won't let her rise." "Then why is she inside you?" He moved like lightning. His blade sang curved and silver, drawn from nowhere, and struck where her throat had been a heartbeat ago. Shan ducked, the staff deflecting in a wide arc. Sparks flew. The seal dropped to the ground, cracking louder. The assassins closed in, but they weren't alone. The mist behind them moved, figures emerging not of flesh, but of veil and ritual scar. Cultists, survivors of the crucible, drawn here by the lingering echo of Hua Yin's will. They carried brands instead of blades. They screamed prayers instead of tactics. And from the west slope came thunder, Iron Fang Liu, and what remained of his bounty crew, drawn by the same scent of prophecy and coin. 3 factions, 1 quarry, All blades drawn. The sacred gardens became a slaughterhouse. The mist turned red. Steel flashed. Fire flared. Chant and invocation collided with brute force and hex. Yan Zhen carved a path through the cultists, spells woven into every swing, stars igniting in his wake. His eyes were blank with focus, mouth muttering sacred coordinates that called fire from sky. Shan counted once, twice shields barely holding, wards cracking like glass. Iron Fang Liu gunned down an acolyte with a flint charge round, ducked under a daemon priest's claw, and slit his throat with a poisoned talon knife. Bone Dog went down screaming as 3 assassins tore into him, but not before detonating a blood glyph that took 2 with him. Above them all, the statue of the moon goddess shattered, cleaved in 2 by arcane fire. Shan moved like a ghost, dodging, weaving, hunting the broken seal. She found it half buried beneath a dying lotus bush, pulsing weakly, the jade blackening. Yun saw her. He raised his hand to cast. She whispered, a name not hers, not his, but one the stars forgot. The Empress answered. Green fire burst from Shan's chest. It was not hers to command, but it listened for now. The blast struck Yan full in the chest, hurling him back through a wall of bone bamboo. He vanished into mist and blood. The power left her gasping. The seal cracked again. You cannot bind what was made to burn, the Empress whispered. Shan clutched the seal to her chest and ran, limping, bleeding, half mad with pain and power. Behind her, the sacred gardens burned. The pond boiled. The prayers turned to screams. And above it all, the mist formed a shape, a crown, waiting, watching, welcoming her home. Chapter 8. Temple of Echoing Flame. The road to Yanhe was not marked on any honest map. Shan Yuè followed it anyway. It wound through dead land, blackened plains where nothing grew, where the earth cracked open to bleed steam and sulphur. The sky above was permanently bruised, clouds smeared thick with ash. Every step toward the volcanic range felt like walking into a furnace that hated her personally. The ground trembled beneath her boots, not constantly, but thoughtfully, as though the mountain were aware of her approach and weighing whether to swallow her whole. She was dying, slowly, inexorably. The wound Yan Zhen had carved into her side had never closed. It festered with jade light, pulsing in time with the Empress's breath inside her skull. Her vision blurred at the edges, the world bleeding into green and gold. She leaned on her staff more with each mile, leaving bloody footprints that hissed faintly where they touched the heated stone. This is where I was crowned, Hua Yin whispered, her voice thick with memory and longing. I screamed until the mountain listened. I bled until the fire bent its knee. Shan ground her teeth and kept walking. The temple of Yanhe rose from the volcano's caldera like a crown hammered into flesh. It was not built on the mountain, but from it walls of obsidian veined with molten rock, pillars carved from basalt that still radiated heat. Lava rivers flowed through channels cut with ritual precision, casting the entire structure in a hellish orange glow. Ash fell like snow. The air stank of iron, smoke, and old prayers. Shan reached the outer steps just as the chanting began. It rolled through the caldera in waves, hundreds of voices, layered and distorted by heat and echo. The cult of the burning veil had beaten her here. They filled the temple's terraces, their bodies painted in ash and blood, veils aflame with green witchfire. Banners bearing Hua Yin's sigil snapped in the furnace wind. At the heart of the temple, atop a raised dais suspended over a lake of lava, stood the final seal. It was not jade, it was bone. A massive ring of fused skeletons, human, dragon, and something else that hurt to look at, bound together with chains of glowing script. At its center hovered a shard of pure green flame, flickering weakly, imprisoned by the last act of defiance of a dying world. The seal of regret. Shan felt it immediately. It pulled at her like gravity. The cult's high priestess stood before it, arms raised, her body flayed and restitched with gold wire. Her mouth opened far too wide as she screamed the final verses of the rite. The lava surged in response, rising in pillars that twisted into screaming faces. "They are opening it," Huayin whispered, breathless with anticipation. "They want me whole." "No," Shan rasped. "They want what you promise." She staggered forward. The cultists noticed her at once. They howled. Dozens broke formation and charged, knives and ritual blades raised. Shan planted her staff and unleashed a wave of heat-warped force that snapped bone and boiled blood. The survivors fell screaming into lava channels, their souls torn free in emerald arcs that fed the seal. "Too many, too close," the mountain answered. The ash pits surrounding the temple began to boil. From them rose the dead, not shambling corpses but shapes of memory, armored in spectral jade, eyes burning with cold loyalty. The ghosts of Huayin's dynasty clawed their way free, screaming war cries that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. They fell upon cultists and intruders alike, blades of green flame cutting through flesh and soul without distinction. The temple became a charnel pit. Shan ran. She dodged between dueling ghosts and cultists, the air alive with shrieks and the crack of burning steel. A spectral general lunged at her, halberd raised but paused. It knelt. The others followed. "They remember me," Huayin said softly. "They will not harm you. You are my vessel." "Then make them stand down," Shan screamed. "No," the Empress replied. "Let them feed." Shan cursed and pushed past, climbing the final steps to the dais. The heat was unbearable now. A boot smoked, a skin blistered. The final seal pulsed brighter with every death. The high priestess turned, smiling through her flayed lips. "You came," she crooned. "The bride of fire. We felt you burning your way home." Shan didn't answer. She drove her staff through the woman's chest. The priestess laughed as she died, blood boiling, eyes fixed on the seal. Her soul ripped free and vanished into the green flame. The seal flared, the chains cracked. Shan screamed in rage and despair and understanding. This was never meant to be stopped cleanly, only paid for. She stepped into the ritual circle. The ghosts wailed. The lava surged. The Empress surged with it. "You cannot seal me again," Huayin whispered. "Not without becoming me." Shan raised the half-restored seal she carried, its jade fractured, its runes barely holding. "I know." She pressed it to her chest and began the rite. She tore memories from herself and fed them to the flame. Her childhood, her lover's face, the sound of her master's voice, each offering strengthened the seal, reforging chains of light around the core. The pain was unimaginable. She screamed until her throat bled. The Empress howled in fury. "You would erase yourself? For them? For me?" Shan gasped. The final seal snapped shut with a sound like a mountain breaking its spine. The ghosts shrieked and were dragged back into the ash. The cultists burned. The lava fell silent. Shan collapsed on the dais, sobbing, the world dimming around her. The temple of echoing flame began to crumble, and somewhere deep within her, the Empress burned, caged, furious, and very much alive, the seal held. For now. Chapter 9. The Last Prayer of the Jade Empress. The earth cracked beneath her. Shan Yuè lay sprawled across the scorched obsidian dais, blood pooling beneath her ribs, fingers twitching around the glowing remnants of the final seal. Her vision blurred at the edges, everything tinged in molten gold and jade. The echoes of the rite still rang in her bones, raw syllables clawing their way through her throat like thorns. All around her, the temple of Yanhuo groaned and wept. Columns split, statues shattered, lava churned like a hungry tide, bubbling higher, closer. The gods had long fled this place, but something older had taken notice, something divine, something awake. "You kneel at the altar of your own extinction," said a voice from everywhere and nowhere, not in her mind, not from the flames, from her own mouth. Shan's lips moved without consent, her jaw unlocked, slow and cracking, as if her very bones were being pried open, and the Empress spoke through her. "You have brought me here," she said, her voice layered and ancient, folding centuries into syllables. "You carved my name into the stone of the world once more. You breathed me into memory." Shan tried to resist, to clench her teeth, to scream, but she was no longer only herself. The vessel and the flame had merged, and her flesh had become conduit. "See now what you are," Huayin whispered through her, stepping forward in her stolen body. The dais split beneath their feet. From the lava rose a mirror of jade and fire, conjured not by spell, but by truth. It showed Shan's face, but not her eyes. They were burning green, regal, devouring. Her skin was marked by runes, not learned, but remembered. Her body stood taller, straighter, cloaked in intangible majesty, a goddess reborn. "No," Shan croaked, barely audible through the crack in her control. "You are not me." Huayin's laugh was thunder. "You were me. Every step, every seal, every drop of blood. You walked the path I left you, and now we return to the throne denied me." The temple shook. Below, the lava burst its banks. One of the last intact columns shattered and fell into the molten pool with a hiss like a dragon's death rattle. Screams echoed in the distant hollows, survivors, cultists, beasts. But Shan could not move. She was not in control, not anymore. "Your magic was only ever the flint," said Huayin. "I am the fire," the volcano answered her. The mountain bucked like a wounded beast. Cracks spiderwebbed through the temple floor. Ash rained from the sky, turning the world black. Plumes of green fire burst from fissures along the caldera, spiraling into the heavens like banners of war. And still, the Empress marched forward, using Shan's legs, Shan's lungs, each step toward the edge of the dais, toward the world beyond. "From this fire," she proclaimed, arms spread wide, "I will rise again, not as memory, not as spirit, but as empire." Then Shan saw it. The mirror still lingered, in its surface flickering her true self. Not the jade-eyed monster, not the crowned tyrant, just a woman, bloodied, exhausted, alone. But still Shen, the final seal, trembled in her hand. It was nearly spent, the sacrifice incomplete. One piece remained, here, to bind Huayin, not just temporarily, not just for another age, but forever. Shan would need to offer the last thing she still possessed, her magic. Not the spells, not the chants, but the spark within her that had always defied death, fate, and obedience. that rebellious, burning seed. "I won't let you take me," she whispered. Hawaiian's smile faltered. "Just for a moment." "You already have," she said. Shan closed her eyes and let go. She opened her soul like a gate, pouring everything into the seal, every sigil, every word she'd ever learned, her fire, her ice, her shadow and light. She bled her essence into it like ink into paper, saturating it until it screamed. The seal blazed in her hands. It cracked, and then it sealed. The flame was snatched inward, the Empress howling, tearing through her lungs, her ribs, her blood, trying to claw free. But the ritual was final. The chains returned, this time inside Shan, forged from the magic she no longer possessed. Hawaiian was bound. The jade fire vanished. Shan collapsed. The volcano erupted. It did not roar. It shrieked a cry of divine rage and thwarted destiny. The temple was obliterated in seconds. The mountains split open. Rivers of molten fury spewed into the sky, turning night to unnatural day. But Shan fell into darkness before she saw the end, and the final seal, now etched into her bones, pulsed once, then went quiet. For the first time in an age, the Empress did not speak. Chapter 10. Ashes and Silence. The sky was black with soot for 100 leagues. For 3 days, it rained ash across the eastern provinces of Cathay, blanketing cities, burying fields, choking rivers. Livestock fled into the hills. Infants were born silent. Monks dreamed of green fire curling beneath their eyelids, and in every direction the wind carried one scent, scorched stone and something older, something like godflesh. The eruption of Mount Yanho was called a natural disaster by the celestial bureaucracy, an unfortunate alignment of dragon lines, a geological inevitability, a tragedy that would be studied, mourned, and then quietly buried beneath state-sanctioned silence. The temple of echoing flame had vanished. All records of it were purged. No maps named it, no tongue dared. And of the woman rumored to have been seen near its gates, the exile, the heretic, the witch, they found no body, no bones, only scorched stone and melted jade where she might have fallen. Shan Yuè was declared destroyed, another victim of her own blasphemy. Case closed. Seal it in wax and forget. But the truth lingered like smoke. She woke beneath a sky the color of bone. The world was quiet, too quiet. Not just the absence of noise, but the absence of magic. That familiar hum, that eternal pulse just beneath her skin, was gone. Her veins felt empty, her breath shallow. When she reached for a simple hex, just a flicker of warmth, a trickle of light, nothing answered. The seal had taken everything. She was hollow and alive, barely. She lay in a shallow crater of glassed stone. Her robes fused to her flesh in places, her hands blackened from where the seal had etched itself into her palms before vanishing. Every breath rattled in her chest like a borrowed thing. Her staff was gone, her scrolls ash. Her hair was burned to the scalp, her feet blistered beyond recognition. But she lived, and in the silence, she heard only herself. New empress, no whispers, no flame, only memory, and the price. The days passed without measure. She limped down the ruined slope of the mountain, past rivers of cooled obsidian and statues half sunken in ash. She drank rainwater filtered through cloth and ate bitter roots that tasted of sulfur. Her magic, once her anchor, her weapon, her soul was gone. She bled like anyone else now. She dreamed like anyone else. Sometimes she wept, not for what she had lost, but for what she had given away freely, knowing it would break her. But the Empress did not rise. The world did not burn. The seals, for now, held, and that was enough. Far across Cathay, the Bureau's scribes rewrote the story. The cult of the Burning Veil was branded a foreign plague, an incursion from the Western Chaos lands. The deaths were tallied, the cities afflicted, the temples purified. Yan Zhen, the astromancer who had pursued Shan, was awarded a posthumous commendation and quietly buried under layers of disavowal. His reports were sealed in dragon-bone boxes, labeled false omens. The officials spoke of balance restored, of order renewed. They smiled in their halls, but none dared approach the mountain. At the edge of the ruined caldera, where the last breath of the Empress had seared stone into memory, something grew. Just one thing. A blossom. Not large, not dramatic, but impossible. A single jade flower blooming from a split in the obsidian. Its petals shimmered in unnatural light, green one moment, silver the next. Its center pulsed faintly, as if remembering the heartbeat of a god. Pilgrims came, first one, then more. They knelt before it in silence. They offered no prayers, only questions, and if one leaned close, very close, they claimed to hear it speak. Not in words, in secrets, memories that weren't theirs, names long buried, visions of a woman walking through fire, smiling as the world turned to ash. They did not understand, not yet, but the flower bloomed, and it was waiting.